Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're continuing our series on the days of the kingdom. Last week we talked about Bathsheba, or it may have been more appropriate to have called it Uriah. Affected him as much or more than her. But it was about really in the center of it all was David, was King David, who got comfortable, and just like the Torah had warned Israel, when God warned him, when he brought him into the promised land, and they started and they started prospering, they would basically forget about him and do the wickedness they weren't doing when they was depending upon him. Well, that's exactly what happened with David, as we saw last week. And the root of it was he couldn't see the material things and the comforts of life and all that blinded him to his need for God. He was just as desperate need for God when he was in the palace as he was when he was in the cave hiding from Saul for his life. Our circumstances do not change that. We need daily bread. We're to ask for daily bread, not just food for our bodies, but man shall not live by bread alone, by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. We need time with God. We need to be in touch with God every day. We are in desperate need every day, where we realize it or not. And David had also forgotten the warning of the Torah because of this getting caught in the cares of this world and pulling him away from the things of God. The warning that, do not be mistaken, your sins will find you out, and find you out they did on him. And he started having some consequences, and among them was a venereal disease. In Psalm 78, the verse 7 or 8 verses talk about, where it's very specific about his loins, the area of his genitals, stank, and he had these wombs. And it may have went on for as long as a year, as we saw. Definitely didn't go on any longer than that. Sometime between when Bathsheba conceived the first child, who died, that was one. He's going to be punished 12 ways for what he did. That was one of them. Until she conceived Solomon, was about a year. And in that gap, perhaps during almost all that gap, he had this terrible venereal disease. And David owned up to the fact that he was stupid. It says foolish in King James, but in Southern part of America, we say stupid. We mean what the Bible says by foolish. And the guy was beating the stupid out of him to make him wise again. It's an expression, we use in the American South. They're beating the stupid out of him. God will chastise you to get the rod is for the back of the fool, to drive foolishness out of them. And God's chastisement included sickness. And there's some other things as well. We're going to look at those, and we're going to pick up. We're going to look at some of these other things that's going to come upon David, and we're going to see them start coming upon him in our lesson today, which mostly focuses on 2 Samuel 13 and 14. Okay, now, and we're going to remind you of some of the events that happened, because we're going to parallel as the next chapter, couple chapters of David's life play out. And so we begin there in chapter 2 Samuel 11, 2 through 5. Again, 2 Samuel 11, verses 2 through 5. We read the following. And it came to pass in the evening tide, that David arose from his bed, walked on the roof of the king's house. From the roof he saw a woman bathing or washing herself. The woman was very beautiful to look upon. David sent and inquired after the woman. And one said, Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent messengers and took her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. For she was purified from her uncleanness, and she returned from her house. And the woman conceived and sent and told David and said, I am with child. Well, there's some important elements here for us to consider. We're not going to cover everything we talked about last week, but important of our lesson today, our passage of the day we're going to look at, is this. She's the wife of Uriah the Hittite. This woman's beautiful, and she's the wife of Uriah the Hittite. And again, David has all these sons and stuff. He's not shooting blanks. And this woman being purified meant her flow of blood from her monthly period had ended a week earlier. And when a woman's in their maximum availability for conception or likelihood of conception at that point. And David had been shooting blanks, and he sowed seed and they reaped a harvest. Like, who could have saw that coming? Well, not David at the time, because he was being stupid as an ape, as one person has put it. So, but what's important here is he could not have this woman. This woman was the wife of Uriah the Hittite. He wanted the woman he could not have. And he plotted to lay with her anyway. He plotted to have sex with her anyways. Now we're going to look at 2 Samuel 11, 14 through 17, and we're going to see another passage. Going to be another passage right here. It's going to be paralleled in what we're going to look at today. This is part of that coming back on that reaping what he sowed. And it came to pass in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter saying, set you Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire you from him, he may be smitten and die. And it came to pass, when Joab observed the city, they assigned Uriah to a place where knew the valiant men were. And the men of the city went out and fought with Joab. And there fell some of the people, the servants of David. And Uriah the Hittite died also. Again, not going to go over all the things I talked about last week, but what's important for this one is, what's most important here is David's plot here, and he's plotting with Joab. He has a co-conspirator. Joab has read the letter, and Joab carried out the instructions. And Joab is David's kinsman. He's his nephew, to be more precise. Okay. So he made a plot to kill Uriah over this woman he could not have, but already engaged in sex with, the wife of Uriah. Now in 2 Samuel 12, 9 through 10, we're going to look at some of the consequences that were promised to him for doing this. And we're going to see those start playing out here in 2 Samuel 12 again, verses 9 through 10. Wherefore now you despise the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight. You killed Uriah the Hittite with a sword, and has taken his wife to be your wife, and has slain with the sword of the children of Ammon. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me, and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Okay, as we saw last week when we was looking at chapter 11, the end of it looks like David's gotten away with the whole thing. Nobody's the wiser, except the Lord knew, and he was displeased. Well, he'd sent Nathan, and this is one of the judgments, this part of those judgments that's going to come upon David for this. And that's the root of the problem, is he despised the Lord. When we despise the commandments of the Lord to do evil in his sight, and how David despised the commandment of the Lord, he didn't keep it. We don't keep God's commandments, we despise them. And ultimately, we're despising him who gave them. And again, what led David to get to that state was not spending time with God, not recognizing his desperate need for God. Now, David immediately repents. And that's what I advise anyone else to do if they get in a situation like that. But notice, he hasn't fooled God. But notice, because this reaping and sowing, the reciprocal nature of God. He killed Uriah the Hittite with a sword. Even though he used someone else's sword to do it, David's still responsible. Therefore, the sword's not going to depart from his house. And that's the important, and that is what's going to be set off and we look at the day's lesson, is going to start coming to pass. And it's going to go on for a long time. And notice, never, as long as David's alive, these repercussions are going to keep coming. Inside his own household. Okay, now we go to 2 Samuel 13, verses 1 through 4. And we begin with the main part of the day's lesson, but with that background set in mind, because we're going to see those repercussions, him reaping what he sows here. And it came to pass after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a fair sister, whose name was Tamar. And Amnon, the son of David, loved her. And Amnon was so vexed that he fell sick for his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin. And Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimea, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very subtle man. And he said to him, "Why are you, being the king's son, lean from day to day? Will you not tell me?" And Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Okay, so notice this. Bathsheba was beautiful, a fair sister, a beautiful sister, okay? Now, it's his brother Absalom's sister. Amnon and Absalom are both sons of David, but they have different mothers. So, so Tamar's his half sister. And the law that God gave Moses said he couldn't have her. Even though the pagans, like the Egyptians, even later during the time of the Ptolemies, sibling marriage was not uncommon, where they'd marry their own sister or whatever. And they had to, when Adam and Eve's kids, obviously. But but by the time of Moses, God made a law, said, nope, you don't have to do that no more. So now, this is a woman that he cannot have, that's beautiful, and he's gonna have to find a way. He doesn't know how. He's gonna have to have a plot together. And notice who this plot is. Jonathan's a very subtle man, meaning clever, deceitful. No, it's more than deceitful. Anyways, but yeah, he's very much a plotter. And remember, Joab was also much of a plotter. This is Amnon's cousin. And Joab was David's nephew. So all those things are repeating here. Now we're going to continue on and see what this plot is for Amnon to get the woman he wants but cannot have. And Jonadab said to him, "Lay down you upon your bed and make yourself sick. And when your fire come to see you, say unto him, I pray you, let my sister Tamar come and give me meat," that's say food, "and dress the meat in my sight, I may see it, and eat at her hand." And Amnon lay down and made himself sick. And when the king was come to see him, Amnon said to the king, "I pray you, let your sister Tamar, my sister Tamar, come down and make me a couple of cakes in my sight that I may eat at her hand." Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Now go to your brother Amnon's house and dress him meat." Again, meat means food, King James. All right, so Don't be thinking of, animal food, steak or something here. Okay, so Jonadab has this plot. And notice the plot is the what? Get the woman to where Amnon's at. Just as David had Bathsheba brought over to his place. A plot to do the exact same thing. And Amnon is involving David in this plot unwittingly, just as the men who went to go get Bathsheba didn't know what David was calling for her for. Okay, well, we're going to continue on here in 2 Samuel 13, verses 8 through 1, 8 through 11. And we're going to see how well this plot works and how this plot works out. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house and he lay down. And she took flour and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight and had baked the cakes. And she took a pan, poured them out before him, and he refused. And Amnon said, have all the men go out from me. And they all went out, every man from him. And Amnon said to Tamar, bring the meat into the chamber that I may eat of your hand. And Tamar took the cakes which she made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon her brother. And when she brought them unto him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, come lie with me, my sister. Okay, again, notice the similarity here with Bathsheba. She didn't know why the king called him. He brought him in there, obviously put everyone else out. But, and she perhaps didn't know why, and she's afraid, not to go when the kingly calls, etc. So, but at a certain point, it's obvious why David wanted her there. She conceived, when at some point David's like, take your clothes off and lie with me or whatever. The gig's up. She definitely knows. Well, Tamar here has followed that same pattern. The gig is up now. He definitely has made it known. Amnon has definitely made his intentions known. Now, we're going to continue on here in Samuel 13, verses 12 through 14, and we're going to look and see her response to this. And we know what Bathsheba's was, obviously, but let's take a look at hers. And she answers it, nay, my bro, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not you this folly. And where shall I go? Where shall I cause my shame to go? As for you, you shall be as one of the fools in Israel. Now therefore, I pray you, speak to the king, he will not withhold you from me. However, he would not hearken to his voice, and being stronger than her, he forced her and lay with her. Okay. So she sees he's determined to do this, or she gives him permission or not. With or without her consent, he is going to have sex with her. And in fact, do not force me. She wasn't given the consent. This is rape, okay? Plain and simple. This wasn't her enticing him like so-called date rape, where the girl's got the guy all worked up, and he's about to, and he's perhaps already starting to penetrate, and then then decides to change their mind. Well, no, this is just plain out rape. He's determined to do this. He forced her, and she's going to be a fool, and this rape's going to put her to shame. And people who get raped feel shame, and sometimes it just never leaves them. Anyways, but he's going to be a fool because the penalty for rape in the law was death. And notice, speak to the king. Well, he can't have her under the law, but she believes that David's going to grant it anyways. And why does she believe that? Because David has lost all of his moral authority. He did not keep the law himself. Now there's the expectation that other people could not keep the law that are under him. And this happens with parents all the time. They tell their children they need to live a certain way but the parents themselves don't do it. And then they act shocked to the children, don't take them serious about it, and go and do those things they told them they shouldn't done, and don't live the way they said they should have because the parents didn't model it. David went and made a wife of someone who he could not have. So she has no reason to believe David won't do the same for Amnon. And then it won't be rape. They'll be consensual, and they'll be married, and so on and so forth. Now, as we continue on in Second Samuel 13, verse 15 through 17, we're going to see the result of this rape, the effect it has. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly. So he hated her wherewith he hated her. So the hatred wherewith he hated her was greater than the love with where he had loved her. And Amnon said to arise and be gone. She said unto them, there is no cause. This evil and sin to me away is greater than the other that you did unto me. We would not hearken unto her. Then he called his servant to minister unto him and said, now put this woman out from me and bolt the door after her. Okay. No. Amnon hates her. The law said if someone raped a woman, they're to be killed. And she didn't entice him anyway or nothing, but he is not. Remember, David, as we mentioned, when finally confronted by Nathan the prophet, immediately repented. In the Psalms we read, he acknowledges he'd acted as a fool. And the guy was punishing him so he'd start being wise in another psalm. I think it was Psalm 51 we read that. Anyways. To bring him back to the place of wisdom. But what's Amnon doing? Like we've seen so many times, he's blaming the victim. He's making a victim of her twice. This evil of sin rates greater, that's worse than the rape, is this rejection. Because this woman's scorned now, and the message to other men might be, yeah, she looks beautiful, but she's just lousy lay, as some people would say, or whatever. Okay, but it's just utter humiliation. And notice, and what did David do after he's done with Bathsheba? He sent her back to her house, and that's exactly what Amnon has done. Now we're going on the second. We're going to continue on here in 2 Samuel 13 and see what happens next with Tamar. Remember this, Tamar is the same name of the woman dressed herself up like a prostitute that Judah went into because he would not give her a son. That's the ancestor of King David. And let's go ahead and read about her. She had a garment of diverse colors upon her. For such robes were with the king's daughters that were virgins apparelled. Then the servant brought her out and bolted the door after her. And Tamar put ashes on her head and rent her garment of diverse colors that was upon her. and laid her hand on her head and went on crying. And Absalom, her brother, said unto her, Has Amnon been with you? But hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Regard not this thing. So she remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. But when King David heard these things, he was very wroth. And Absalom spoke unto his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad. For Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. Okay. Amnon has made a lifelong enemy here, needless to say. But let's know this coat of diverse colors, like the coat of many colors of Joseph, perhaps it could remind us of. And that whole signal that she was a virgin. Well, no, she tore them, and that's a sign of mourning, but also a sign that her mourning over her virginity being stolen from her. Ashes on her head, a sign of mourning again. And Absalom realizes what's happened. He perhaps has known Amnon was lusting after her before. The word said loved her, it should say lust. It would be more, modern ideal. His hatred of her is greater than his lust for her. So now she tells him to not tell anyone what he's saying there, but hold your peace. Because he's his brother. He don't believe the king will do a thing about it. And he's right. David gets mad. He's very angry. But the law required him to be more than very angry. He's the judge over all of Israel. The law required him to have Amnon killed for rape, for raping his sister. And remember in Exodus when the Levites had said, Moses, who's on the Lord's side? And the Levites said they went through stabbing, they went through killing everyone they could find that was naked in this worship of Baal. In Deuteronomy, we were given more information about more details, and that included, and we found that included their own parents, their own siblings, their own best friends, their own children. It's just as Messiah said, if you don't love him more than mother, father, sister, brother, so on and so forth, you're not worthy of him. King David was the love God, and this, but what's hindering him again? He's lost his moral authority. He's very angry about this, like he was about the man that Nathan told the parable, until Nathan said, "You are the man," but he just can't act anymore. He just can't act anymore because it's coming out. It's coming out everything he did, and so he's just gonna have to be angry about it. But Absalom's not done. He knew David wasn't going to do anything. But Absalom is a plotter as well. So this is another consequence of David on David. His daughter was put to shame. And as we showed, Bathsheba, we showed from the law that the reason why she only has the one consequence of the child dying is because she was the king's over everyone, and the law said if a bondswoman committed adultery against her husband, that she was not to be killed, but to be chastised because she was not free. Well, this daughter of David, was not free after Absalom had her bolted in the room with her as well. So now he's had a daughter raped as payback for what he did to Uriah with his wife. This came upon his daughter as well. The consequences are not over yet. We're gonna continue on here because the day's lesson is the exile or banishment of Absalom. And Absalom has certainly lost a lot of respect for his father here. In the very sense there's an exile with David that went on as soon as this happened, and David took no action. But the plotting's not done. So it came to pass after 2 years. Again, 2 Samuel 13, verse 33 through 25. It came to pass after 2 full years that Absalom had sheep shearers in Baal Hazor, which is beside Ephraim. And Absalom invited all the king's sons. And Absalom came to the king and said, behold now your sheep shearers. I mean, your servant has sheep shearers. Let the king, I beseech you, his servants go with your servant. And the king said to Absalom, nay, my son, let us not all go now, lest we be chargeable to you. And he pressed him, albeit he would not go, but blessed him. Okay, so now this was not uncommon. The sheep shearing was a time of great joy often. Money was coming in soon. Wool was harvested. Some varieties of sheep are raised for wool, some for meat, and the ones that are raised for meat have less wool and more hair. The ones raised for wool, obviously. And the reason is the lanolin makes the meat not taste well. You just like cattle, you have milk breeds and milk breeds and used to be power breeds that carry to pull things and whatever, and beef breeds ones to eat. It's similar here with sheep. And so when you got the wool type you're raising, it's a great celebration, as it was non-common. So there's nothing suspicious here. There's nothing suspicious here about this. Okay, this place Baal Hazor means Baal's village, or the Lord, or Baal's village. Okay, or Lord, not Adonai, but Lord as in ruler. Okay, so he's inviting them all to this big party besides the sons, and he's probably doubtfully not surprised. David says, we can't all go with you. It's going to cost. He says it's going to cost you too much. What he's saying about be chargeable to you. You're going to spend so much money on food for that many people, but he blesses him nonetheless. So now Absalom's going to narrow down to get down to what get more towards what he really is wanting out there. And this Baal Peor, by the way, is about half a day's journey from Jerusalem. So it's over there near Ephraim, perhaps in Benjamin. Now then said Absalom, if I pray, again we're reading 2 Samuel 13, continue on in verses 26 through 28. Then said Absalom, if not, I pray you let my brother Amnon go with us. And the king said to him, why should he go with you? But Absalom pressed him. They would let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Now Absalom commanded his servants, saying, mark you now, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, when I say unto you, smite Amnon, then kill him. Fear not, have I not commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. So, again, Absalom probably knew from the beginning David wasn't going to do this. He's being very subtle here, very, very, very underhanded, as it were. And now just remember Joab. I mean, David's instructions were all plot to kill Uriah, but these other people died as well. Well, now, so David's going to cover up his intention of really only way cares to come to all is Amnon. He's covered up with these other sons of King David as well. And his plans to kill Amnon. And notice only Amnon. But that's all David was concerned with. Everyone else was collateral damage as far as David was concerned. And Absalom's the same way. As long as Amnon's dies, he's happy. Well, we're gonna look at what the effect of the plot here as we go on. And the servants of Absalom did unto Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and every man got him up from his mule and fled. And it came to pass when they were in the way that the tidings of David came to him, saying, Absalom has slain all the king's sons, and there's not one of them left. And the king rose and tore his garments and lay on the earth, and all his servants stood by with their clothes rent. Okay, well, as we can see, they didn't really get all killed. And this is a lesson for us right here. This is a rumor here. Absalom has slain all the king's sons, not one of them is left. This is fake news, all right? Absalom didn't slay all the king's sons. But that's the rumor nonetheless. And David totally buys it. And the reason is because Amnon had done wrong, but these other sons had done nothing wrong. Well, Uriah hadn't done wrong, but in his plot to kill Uriah, as we've mentioned, a bunch of other people died as well who had nothing to do with it. And David believes that is coming upon him. He's reaping that consequence of what he sowed and getting those innocent men who had nothing to do with the whole thing taken off the earth. And of course, they brought damages to their families when they did that as well. Now, in 2 Samuel 33, verse 32 to 13, verse 32 to 33, we're going to look at the story's not over yet. And this record's about to be set straight. And Jonadab, the son of Shemiah, David's brother, answered and said, Let not my lord suppose they have slain all the young men of the king's sons, for Amnon only is dead. For by the appointment of Absalom, this has been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar. Now, therefore, let not my lord the king take this thing to heart, to think that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon only is dead. Okay, so it's kind of a little bit good news, bad news here. And the good news is they're not all dead. The bad news is Amnon is. And notice, again, it's the same one that advised Amnon in the first place. And he seems to have inside knowledge here. Perhaps he advised Absalom in this plot. Perhaps he, did not know Amnon was going to rape Tamar. Didn't know Amnon was going to rape Tamar. And perhaps had a little regret and worked with them. Or perhaps he just he's underhanded and could see this coming. But he knew that ever since he's done this, Absalom was determined for Amnon to die. And that is what the law said. Amnon is dead, not by the hand of David, whom it should have been carried out. But again, he eroded his own immoral authority with the whole Bathsheba thing, but by the son of Absalom. But we're going to continue on here and say, we're going to continue on in 2 Samuel 13, verses 34 through 36. And we're going to look at how this plays out. I mean, really, Absalom, Amnon just got what he deserved. And maybe Absalom could have just went to the king or whatever, but he didn't think the king was going to be disposed towards him. And that's apparent from the text here. But Absalom fled, and the young man which kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, to behold, there came much people by the way of the hillside behind him. And Absalom said, and Jonadab said to the king, Behold, the king's sons come. As your servant said, so it is. And it came to pass, as he made into speaking, and behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept, and the king also and all his servants wept very sore. Okay, they're all weeping over Amnon. Well, 2 full years had went by. David had 2 full years to make this right, to take care of this himself. And now Absalom has fled. He's in exile. He's fled. He's heading for exile. And again, perhaps he has felt like he's been in exile ever since Amnon raped his sister, and David did nothing about it. And the rest of them are heartbroken by this. We're going to continue on in 2 Samuel 13, verse 37 through 39. And we're going to see where does this exile at? And how long does it last? But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son every day. And Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there for 3 years. And the soul of David longed to go forth to Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Amnon, seeing he was dead. Okay, so now why would they go to this Tamai? Right, who's Geshur? Remember in the area of the Gilead in the eastern promised land, up in the northeast corner of it, with the Gershurites and another group, and the Maacathites. Anyways, they never drove them out, and they sort of became integrated, lived among Israel until there was no, they never drove them out. They just sort of integrated in. Well, this king up there is up there in the corner, and David and Absalom's mother is the daughter of Tamai. He's fled to his uncle. And David is mourning more for Absalom than he is for Amnon. He is mourning for Amnon, but after 3 years, he longs to go forth to Absalom. He's kind of concerning Absalom, seeing he was dead. He knows Amnon, I'm sorry. He knows Amnon brought this on himself. It's given I'd say where I grew up, a little Ozark justice, for his deed. Where I grew up, men had, when it came to rape, men had an attitude of I have a shot, I have a gun, a backhoe in a secluded place in the woods. Okay, that was kind of the default plan if someone raped their daughter. Okay, so David, someone raped someone, just disappeared, never saw him again. Assumption was the family got him and they got what they deserved, and that was it. We just moved on. Well, that's kind of what David's doing right here. He's just moving on, but he wants Absalom. But Absalom's now been out there in Geshur for 3 whole years. Okay, so 2 years went by this is 5 years after the rape of Tamar, and at least 7 years after the incident with Bathsheba. Well, now we're going to go to the next chapter here in 2 Samuel 14, 1 through 4, and see what's going to bring an end to this exile here. And that's second. So we continue on here in 2 Samuel 14, verse 1 through 4, and we read the following. Now Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived the king's heart was towards Absalom. They sent to Tekoah and fetched a wise woman and said to her, I pray you, feign yourself to be a mourner and put on mourning apparel. Anoint not yourself with oil, but be as one as for a long time mourn for the dead. And come to the king and speak on this matter to him. So Joab put words in their mouth. And the woman of Tekoah spoke to the king. And when the woman of Tekoah spoke to the king, she fell on her face on the ground in obeisance and said, Help, O king. Okay, so Well, remember, God had sent Nathan with words in his mouth put words in the mouth of Nathan, concerning Uriah the Hittite. Well, now Joab's doing something similar with this woman concerning the exile of Absalom. In 2 Samuel 14, verse 15 verse 5 through 7, we're going to start seeing how this plays out. What is this message? And the king said to her, "What ails you?" And she answered, "I am indeed a widow woman, and my husband is dead. And your handmaid had two sons, and they strove together in the field, and there was none to part them. But one smote the other and slew him. And behold, the whole family is risen against your handmaid. They said, Deliver him that smote his brother, that we may kill him for the life of his brother whom he slew, and we will destroy the heir also. And so they shall quench my coal which is left, and shall not leave my husband, neither name nor remainder upon the earth." Okay. Notice the family's risen against the handmaiden. The whole family was perhaps against Absalom for killing Amnon. And he smote his brother and killed him. Now here's the problem she's presenting to him. The law says that start with Noah. By blood, if by man a man's blood is shed by the hand of man, his blood must also be shed. Okay, but her problem is this: David does this. She's going to have no one to take care of her. There's no security back in the day. There's just your children took care when you got old, and that was it. She's going to have no one to take care of her. The property is going to become going out, not being under her husband's name anymore. His line is going to die out. Well, remember we said that sober judgment, the Bible tells us to have, includes the circumstances, the facts, the evidence, and the circumstances. Well, there's the circumstances here. She's not saying that her son didn't kill the other. One son didn't kill the other. But the circumstances, it's going to is the harm it's going to do to other people who had nothing to do with that. We're going to look at David's response. We're going to look at David's response to this. So she's told David a parable, a story, just like Nathan had told David a story. And the king said to the woman, "Go to your house, and I'll give charge. We'll give charge concerning you." And the woman of Tekoah said to the king, "My lord, O king, the iniquity be upon me and upon my father's house, and the king and his throne be guiltless." And the king said, Whoever says aught to you, bring him to me, and he shall not touch you any more. She said, "I pray you, let the king remember the Lord your God, that you would not suffer the avengers of blood to destroy any more, lest they destroy my son." And he said, "As the Lord lives, there shall not one hair of your son fall to the earth." Now, this expression here, be iniquity, that the king be guiltless, okay? It's a plea for him to make righteous judgment. First, notice he's not going to even make a judgment right then. "And I'll give charge concerning you. Go home, and I'll send word where I decide it later," is what he's saying. But she needs judgment right now, and stresses why she's saying that the rest of the family wants to kill him, and unless you prevent, they're going to. The avengers of blood not to destroy anymore. Remember the city of refuge, where they wouldn't do this kid, her son ain't good to go there because he's guilty. That when you go there, it just keeps him from killing you if you killed someone in an accident. But if they're found guilty, you're handed over to the avengers of blood anyways. Her only hope is for the king to protect her son. And King David does because of the circumstances. He's letting his son go, let God deal with him later. But he's letting his son live so he can feed, so he can take care of his mother and perhaps have children, hopefully have his own sons to carry on the name of this woman's dead husband. It's really about taking care of the parents, not, and that's a weightier matter to King David than justice being served. So no Ozark justice for this guy. Now continue on here in 2 Samuel 14, verse 12 through 16. And we're going to read we're going to read how the woman responds to this, see what happens next. The woman said, "Let my handmaid speak to you one word to my lord the king." He said, "Say on. Wherefore have you thought such a thing against the people of God? For the king does speak this one thing which is faulty, and the king does not fetch again home is banished. For we must need die, and as water spilt on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again, neither does the God respect any person. Yet he devised means that his banished be not expelled from him. Now, therefore, I am come to speak this thing to my king, because the people have made me afraid. And your handmaiden said, I will now speak to the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his handmaid. For the king will hear and deliver his handmaid out of the man that would destroy me, and my son out of the inheritance of God." Okay, well, what she's saying here to the king is this. He's banished, he's his own banished Absalom. He's not fetched him home again. And, she's asking for her son who killed his brother to be guaranteed protection. Yet no one's going to believe it when David's own son, Absalom, is fled off somewhere else for protection from David for killing his brother. So notice this is a very important thing here. We all must die and cannot be gathered up again as water spilt on the ground. We die these bodies. This body doesn't ever come back alive. We're giving a new body. Okay. Except for God raised from the dead like he did my son, there's no reversing it. And even that's temporary. Like we'll say, think Lazarus. He died again later. He had to go through that twice, but notice what God does do. He devised me that this banished may be brought home again. We've all been in exile. Sin has separated us from our God. And he didn't just lay aside he didn't just lay it aside like this one was asking David to do, but he laid on his own son, Messiah, Yeshua, however you like. Jesus, whatever it is in your language. So that we would not be expelled from him. We were banished just like Adam and Eve were banished from the garden. We've all been in exile from God. But he has made a way for us to be exiled, for our exile to end. And that's what this woman is saying to David. No one's going to believe her and take David serious when his own son's out there in exile for doing the same thing. All right, we're going to see how the rest of this continues to play out as we read here in 2 Samuel verses 14, 17 through 20, how this plot works out, this scheme of Joab. Then the handmaiden said, "The word of the Lord shall be comfortable. For as an angel of the Lord says, the Lord so is the Lord the king to my Lord the king to discern good and bad. Therefore, the Lord your God will be with you. The king answered and said, hide not from me, I pray you, the thing which I shall ask you. The woman said, let my let my lord the king now speak. The king said, is this not the hand of Joab with you in all this? And the woman answered, as your soul lives, my lord the king, none can turn to left or right aught that the Lord my king has spoken. For your servant Joab, he bade me and put these words in the mouth of my hand of your handmaid. To fetch out this form of speech that your servant Joab has your servant Joab done this thing. My Lord is wise, according to wisdom of an angel of God, to know all things are in the earth. Notice the comparison of the angel of God twice, okay? To be wise and knowing and discerning, okay? Let that word be comfortable. You know, meaning ultimately the word concerning the king's own son being in exile. Well, David suspects Joab's behind it because he knows what a plotter and schemer he is. You know, and himself, and he's been afraid. I mean, Joab, he said himself, Joab has been too strong for him. Even David, and then Joab, made official. Joab's the head of the army. The army's more aligned with Joab. But beyond that, Joab has the letter he wrote concerning Uriah. Joab can hold that over him the rest of his life. Okay. He can expose David at any time. So, and he knows that Joab just didn't do things directly. He provoked a war. He provoked a war when David was trying to negotiate peace for the sole purpose of killing the general. The general, only one man, all these other people die, is after one man, Abner. Because he never doesn't want to be king, but he wants to be general. He'll do anything he can to protect that position. So he knows what kind of man Joab is. So we continue on here in 2 Samuel 14, verse 21 through 23, and we read what the king does once he realizes, oh, this is all plot of Joab to end the exile of Absalom. And the king said to Joab, behold, now I've done this thing. Go therefore and bring the young man Absalom again. And Joab fell to the ground to his face and bowed himself and thanked the king. And Joab said, Today your servant knows that I found grace in your sight, O king, and that the king has fulfilled the request of his servant. And Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. Okay, remember, Joab's making this request because he sees the king's hearts towards Absalom. He's really doing this for David's benefit. Again, Joab's very protective of David his entire life. It's not true he wasn't loyal to no one. He was loyal to David. But that part of loyalty was him wanting to be in that position as the general for David. I just can't see David, and perhaps David's distracted by this whole Absalom thing, interfering with the business of the kingdom, interfering with the business of the army. So Joab his plot has worked. Just as when David gave him that plot against Uriah, it worked. Joab's very good at making these plots and making them stick, as it were. Carrying them out successfully, as to say. Okay, now we're going to look at our last section here, and we look at this, and we look at our passage here is as we continue on 2 Samuel 14 is verse 24 through 28, and we see what the result of this return is. And the king said to him, let him turn to his own house and let him not see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house and saw not the king's face. But all Israel is none to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty. From the sole of his feet even to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. When he pulled his head, for as every year's end, they pulled it, His hair was heavy upon him, therefore he pulled it. He weighed that, shaved his head, what we would say today. He weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels after the king's weight. Unto Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar, and she was a woman of fair countenance. And Absalom dwelt 2 years, 4 years in Jerusalem, and saw not the king's face. Okay, notice he names his daughter after his sister. His sister was staying at his house. And notice, in all of Israel, Absalom, whatever word people want to use, dreamy, gorgeous, whatever, handsome. I mean, Absalom is what people are looking for. Absalom, and the truth is, the world does not see things the way God does. Man looks in the outward, as we saw, get the word given to Samuel, but God looks in the inward. Well, those who look on the outward favor those who are beautiful, and Absalom is absolutely, and this 200 shekels, that's around a shekel. Remember, was about 0.2 of an ounce, a fifth of an ounce, or about 56 grams if you're metric. So this hair he's weighing here is a little over a kilogram, or right around a little under, about 2 1/3 ounces. Okay, just a little under 2.5 ounces. I mean, sorry, pounds. 2.5 pounds, not ounces. 2.5 pounds. So he shaves his head, and what he's doing is he gets a haircut once a year. Now the end of the year begins in Aviv, literally means spring, when the month when the barley grain will be ripe in time for the first will be being harvested. The harvest will be ready to be harvested. It's more the accurate term. Be harvested. Well, the last month's the month before that. Okay. So right there, as the weather starts warming up again, he shaves his head and he lets it stay that way. And he just continues the growth of the fall and the winter, then he starts over. But notice that's a lot of hair, okay, even for someone for a whole year. And he's very beautiful, and his daughter's a fair countenance. And that's the third Tamar in Scripture. 3 women named Tamar. So it's named after his sister. So he's got this close relationship with her and with the people of Israel, but not with his father. He's the one. His father cannot stand to see him. He's calling him out of his exile in name only. Absalom is still in exile for 2 more years. Like I said, Absalom probably knew his father was going to behave this way, and that exile really began when the day Amnon raped Tamar. David just cannot get over it. He didn't want his son being off in exile, but he can't stand to see him either. In 2 Samuel 14, verse 29 through 30, we read the following. Therefore, Joab sent to David. Therefore, Absalom sent to start over. Therefore, Absalom sent for Joab to have him send him to the king. But will not come to him, and he sent again the second time, will not come. Therefore he said to his servants, go to Joab's field near mine. His barley there. Go and set it on fire. And Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Okay, so we got here. Joab is sent for. Absalom is sent for Joab because he wants Joab to speak to the king on his behalf. Joab's one that got him out of the exile and brought him back to Jerusalem, but he's still in exile. And Joab, he believes is his only chance for the exile to end between him and David, to be back in the great good graces of his father. But Joab won't come, so he does something to get Joab's attention. Absalom, like Joab, is a schemer and his schemes work. Let's continue on in 2 Samuel 14, verse 31 through 33. Then Joab arose and came Absalom to his house. And his house said to him, "Wherefore have your servants set my field on fire?" And Absalom answered Joab, "Behold, I sent unto you, saying, Come to here, that I may send you to the king to say, why am I come forth from Geshur? It would be good for me to have been there still. Now, therefore, let me see the king's face. If there be any iniquity in me, let him kill me." So Joab came to the king and told him. When he called for Absalom, he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. Okay, so again, the plot here worked, got Joab's attention. Joab said, "Notice, if there be iniquity in me, let me kill him. Let him kill me." Because Absalom knew Amnon, the only iniquity was in David in this matter. As far as David should have had Amnon executed. Absalom did what David would not do and could not do. His conscience would not let him do. He lost his moral authority to govern when he didn't keep the law himself. No one's above the law, not even a king like David. But the exile would look like it's over, but it's not. Absalom realizes, perhaps notice he bows on his ground for the king, submitting to his father. But the king's kissing him. This kiss is perhaps like the kiss of Judas to Messiah. Insincere. So Absalom, this is going to move Absalom to his next move next week when we talk about the plot of Absalom. So the sword has gone in the house of David. His daughter's been raped as a consequence. One of his sons has been killed. The other one was in exile. But David just cannot get over it because it's probably not it's more likely David can't get over it, is having trouble forgiving himself. He knows that this whole thing with Amnon would have never happened if he had not done this thing with Bathsheba. He set the precedence. This, mindset, the king can have any woman he wants or whatever. Well, the king's children thought the same thing then. The king's sons thought, I can have any woman I want. So, in a way, David has lost two sons today, in a sense. But the sword's not done. It will continue. And we'll look at that next week. Until then, shalom.